How's it going, everybody? I've got Steph Scott here with me, and we're just going to dive into her story of transitioning from multiple jobs in ministry into marketplace roles. Steph, so glad you're here with me. How are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm doing great. It's finally sunny outside, so I'm happy.
I love that. I love that. Hey, I'd just love to start off with what was your journey into ministry? What were you doing before ministry? And then when you were
Right.
in ministry, what were some of the roles that you had?
Yeah, so I went into ministry right out of college. So I had gotten my undergrad in accounting and my master's in marketing. Then I had a job at an agency in Dallas lined up. And then someone kind of intersected my path and was like, you should apply to an internship at a church. And I was like, absolutely not. I'm graduating with my master's. Like, that's going to bring the whole average of the master's program way down. And then
Mm.
slowly over the next couple of months, it became very clear that that was like what I wanted to do. So I packed up my stuff, moved across the country, and I did a year-long internship at a church. And then out of that internship, I got hired to do marketing for like the event side of the organization. So it felt like a really good bridge because I was able to use my degree, but I also was learning on the job very much for the first time. With your degree, oftentimes it's like very ethereal, this was more like pricing and all of the like data modeling, and my on the job was way more what you would think of as marketing. So I was the marketing coordinator over there for about 2.5 years, I believe. And I really handled everything that marketing touches. So like social media, both the organic and the paid side, the email marketing, updating the websites. I mean, really everything, kind of like even just getting a little bit more creative with like on the road, making sure that we had all of the marketing stuff handled for like concerts and things like that. So it was really awesome because I got like the full picture of what marketing would be. Whereas had I gone with that agency, it would be very like niche. So it was in ministry and it was marketing. So it was a little bit of both, which was really awesome.
Yeah. So you started it as an internship or in an internship with the church, moved over to that. What
Yeah.
drew you to ministry and doing that in the first place? Because, like you said, there was kind of this like, that doesn't really make sense. It's not really the path I'm going on. So, what was the thing that pushed you, or the things that pushed you over towards
Yeah.
moving into the ministry?
I think my whole life I had always really struggled with wanting to do something that was like super purposeful. I think I grew up in
Mm.
the generation that was like your mom was telling you you're going to be a world changer and you're like, how does that work if I like do social media for a company? Like, is that really world changing? And so I really struggled with that, like wanting to do something that was purposeful. And so when I was stuck with this position of like, do I take this internship at a church or do I go work for an agency? Like, even though the pay was like literally a third, I was like, this is more purposeful. Like, I'll feel more fulfilled doing this. Um, and so I think that's probably ultimately why I chose this internship at a church. And there was like a lot of people that I loved that were like moving to be part of this organization. And so it felt like, okay, even if like the money is not there or the experience wouldn't be there, I would have like people that I could depend on, and I maybe it wouldn't be purposeful in this season, but like long term, like the lives you would change, kind of buying into that, like, oh, I'm really making a difference with what I'm doing. And I think that that outweighed what the agency could offer me, at least at that point in time.
Yeah. And I resonate with that so much coming out of college. I think to college is that time where you kind of look out at the world and you're like, I can be a part of changing that. And
Yeah.
especially you and I both went to large universities with
Uh-huh.
big Bible studies, and there's kind of the like, you feel like you're a part of something bigger than yourself, and it
Right.
motivates you to move forward and like, okay, well, maybe I'll spend the next however long of my life doing something more meaningful, doing something more purposeful. And for me, working for a church, that's very obvious. It's like, oh yeah,
Right.
like we're connecting to the gospel and we're helping people experience who Jesus is. And
Mhm.
that's what it sounds like, along with you just sound like you had some dear friends that moved to actually work for that organization as well. So with all that being said, then you moved over to the event side, doing something that you actually were wanting to do.
Yeah.
So you got purpose, you got people, you got activities that you are excited about, and you kind of like you did your master's for. Sounds like that was a
Mhm.
pretty good setup.
Yeah, it felt like it, right? It was like, "Oh, man, I'm using my degree, I'm working with a purpose," and truly, at the beginning, I loved it. Um, but, it was all things that, like, your first job out of college, you're, like, taking your, like, textbooks and, like, trying to apply them to the real world, and then you quickly realize, like, I know nothing.
Yep.
And so that was, like, very quickly, like, a massive, like, "Okay, great, I learned what an awesome website does. I have no idea how to make an awesome website," or, like, run ads or organic social or email marketing. And as it goes with ministries, a lot of the times, like people are wearing multiple hats and they are running really thin. I feel like that's a pretty easy blanket statement for ministry. And so there wasn't a lot of on the ground training. And, I was even hired as an entry level job and I was hoping that someone would kind of come alongside me, train me, and then, I would slowly take over ownership. And it really was like from day 1, I owned all of these different pieces, and at 23, I probably should not have, and I made a lot of mistakes and lots of typos, which, like, still haunt me in my dreams. I'm not even kidding you. I'll wake up with, like, cold sweats remembering typos, and, I think truly I was given too much responsibility that I really hadn't earned, but because of the necessity of just needing a body to fill a position, I was given a lot of responsibility and that I hadn't earned, if I'm completely honest. And so that
Wow.
tension over the course of those 2.5 years was really challenging because I think a lot of times you want more responsibility. You want to like own things. And if I'm honest, I liked that I owned these channels, but I don't think I deserved to own them. I don't think that I had shown the, like, responsibility and the, like, maturity even to own them, and so it was just this huge friction where I would make mistakes and I'd be like, "I because I shouldn't be doing this," but reality is, like, I needed to take more ownership at the same time, and, it was just fast moving, people were spread thin, you're just, like, running a million miles an hour, and I was, like, still lacing up my shoes, and so it was a hard 2 years of learning on the job, making a lot of mistakes on the job, and it kinda got to the point where I was feeling, like, just very just drained. Like, I was just feeling, like, exhausted, and I felt like there were no outlets for me to go personally, but also in my job. I was like, "Man, I have so many questions about how to do this better, and I don't even know where to go." I think within the whole organization at the time, I was the only person with, like, marketing in their title, and there was, like, 130 people working there. So people would come to me
Wow.
with questions, and I'm like, "Let me Google that for you really quick. Let me just see what I can figure out," you know?
Yeah.
And, yeah, it just got really draining, and, I didn't feel I knew I needed to get better, and I didn't feel like I was getting better. If anything, I felt like I was just stuck in this cycle of I figured out how to tread water, and I don't know how to make it I don't know how to make it out, and I don't know how to get better while I'm in it. So I just felt like I treaded water for 2.5 years.
Wow. Yeah, it sounds like you got probably what almost anyone coming out of college, and knowing you a little bit, you are excitable, you like taking on stuff, you're a hard worker, and you like more. And that's like it feels like that would be someone's dream in a
Mhm.
first job coming out of college. All right, I'm getting tons of responsibility. It's purposeful. I'm working somewhere that's making an impact,
Mhm.
and I get to learn on the job. And that was actually more difficult. It sounds like it was actually
Mhm.
more difficult than you anticipated, and was
Totally.
starting to be an experience that really it wasn't quite drowning you, but
Right.
it sounds like you were just keeping your head above water.
Mhm.
Is that right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, and I didn't realize how much pride I took in having this job at this organization until I didn't have it anymore, and I was like, "Who am I?" And then I was embarrassed, I'm like, "Oh, I guess I put a lot of stock in how cool I
Wow.
thought that job was." So
Wow.
that was
So
a
there was
big
almost
rude
like an
awakening.
identity piece that
Mhm.
so would you say, because I do want to talk about you making that transition, but would you say, looking back, that one of the reasons you stayed where you were for the period of time that you stayed there was because of some of that identity you had put in working for a purpose driven or this particular purpose driven type of organization?
Oh, yeah, for sure. There were people that I loved there. It was, at least within the faith-based world, everybody knew what it was. And so it felt like I had a lot of pride tied up in that and tied up in the fact that I went from an intern to this job, which was kind of difficult at the time. And I think I also really struggled with, okay, well, if this isn't fulfilling, if I go work somewhere that's not faith-based or it's not ministry, how in the world would I feel fulfilled? And this felt to me like the top of the ministry world. I wasn't going to go anywhere
Mm.
better or bigger name or things like that, and which is all pride at the end of the day. But sometimes you don't really realize what you're thinking about until you have to process it when you're making a transition. And I definitely felt stuck in, I'm not going to move up in the ministry world. This is the top, which that's not true, but that's what my mind was telling me, and I couldn't imagine leaving and still feeling purpose if I didn't work for a faith-based organization, and so I think I stayed stuck until there were some just outside circumstances that, um, really made me leave. They pushed me out.
Yeah. So what I think I'm hearing you say is you had some identity in where you were working. And this is one of these things where you I hear from stage and I hear Bible studies, it's talking to corporate people, marketplace people, hey, don't put your identity in work. But
Yeah,
that's not just reserved for people who work in for profit or nonprofit.
right.
It's across the board what I'm hearing from
Yeah.
you. And then on top of that, you're treading water. You're trying to just kind of
Mhm.
stay alive in this place. And there was that tension. And then you mentioned something about there was no up. Did you feel like you were kind of capped out where you were and there was no way to go further in where you were going?
Yeah, and it was, with ministry, it's tricky because it's not necessarily like this empty pot of gold. And if you hit these certain numbers at the end of the year, then the company has more money to put into the ecosystem. And so I think when I accepted the job, I kind of acknowledged those limitations that not like, well, for background, I had done an internship at Ernst and Young. And, it was like, if you work here for 2 years and your salary bumps to this, and then 36 months later, it bumps to this. And it was just like laid out. And I knew that wasn't going to be the case in ministry. But what I didn't anticipate was that year over year, month over month, I would be doing the same thing in June that I was doing last June, and I'll be doing that next June. And I don't necessarily think, I think for some people that really works. I am very excitable and I tire easily. And so once things start getting comfortable and normal and predictable, someone's got to shake it up. So usually then it's me. My husband, this is the big thing for us because I'm constantly like, this is really comfortable. Now, what if we move to Europe for a year? And he's like, things are just now getting easy. And I'm like, exactly. Right. And so I think once I kind of hit those like routine patterns and I was treading water, but I was still like, okay, but this is like more manageable. I'm not necessarily growing, but things aren't necessarily changing. So do I have to grow? I don't know. And I think that's when I really kind of started to lift my head up and think, so would I be doing this exact same thing in just 5 years? And I started evaluating kind of the people around me and realized, yeah, I would be. I'd be doing the same job. I don't necessarily think there's a different position on the horizon or that I would grow because the organization doesn't change like that. I think that's part of being in ministry. I don't fully understand all the different organizational dynamics, but if you just looked around, at least in the organization that I was in, um, we needed you to become an expert at your job at that one position. And I think that was just something that I at that stage in my life was not really willing to do.
Yeah, it's really interesting. All these different facets that lead to making a transition for you. There's the too much too soon. There's the treading water. There's the cap out. There's the not sure if you want to stay where you are long term. But then there's also just a personality piece to it and like a values piece to
Mhm.
it. And it's not that like you were bad or your personality was bad or your value system was bad or that the organization you worked for, their value system was even like bad per se.
Mhm.
It sounds like it's like you came to a space where you're like, just objectively, this is not a fit for me moving forward. And you said there's
Yeah.
some outside circumstances as well, but ultimately it kind of comes, that's what I'm kind of hearing it come down to, that
Yeah.
you just came to a realization, this is not a fit for me anymore. Is that
Mhm.
fair?
Yeah, it was during that time that I learned about the Enneagram, and I discovered that I'm Enneagram 7, and I remember being like, "Oh, so this is why sitting in a chair for 9 to 10 hours a day is, like, soul crushing to me. This is not how it's supposed to be," and it was so freeing to me, and I don't wanna use the Enneagram as a crutch or anything, but it really helped me understand that maybe for my personality, sitting at a desk all day is, like, potentially the most draining thing, especially in, like, the creative space, which so much of marketing is, was like, "Oh, this makes sense," and that was a huge value for the organization that I worked for was, like, "You're in your chair. If you're not in your chair, you're not working," and it was a massive clash because once I kind of realized that, I remember feeling like, yeah, I would tell people I was chained to a desk all day. And I never realized that like when I would say that, I actually meant like that's how my soul felt. It was like chained to a physical thing. And that was a huge eye opener for me. And again, like you said, it kind of made me realize there's nothing wrong with the way that they're doing things or the way that I'm wired. It's just that it's not a good fit anymore.
Yeah, totally. And I love that there was something that you encountered from the outside, like not in your normal flow, wasn't necessarily even an experience you had. It was like some other wisdom or some
Hmm.
like an assessment, and you came across that and it revealed to you, like, oh my gosh, this is the reality that I'm living in, but I didn't have words to put around it. And I think
Hmm.
that's so important that we continue to be in this mode of self discovery,
Hmm.
especially when something feels off in life.
Yeah.
And it's not just saying, oh, well, I'm supposed to be in XYZ situation, or this is where
Yeah.
God has me right now. And it may be. I'm not saying
Hmm.
that like suffering's wrong or discomfort's wrong,
Right.
but it's worth asking why. And it's worth
Right.
going through those or that exploration. And that's what you did, which led you to the, oh, like this insight of, oh, maybe if this is the way it's going to be, maybe I'm not supposed to be here. Can you? I want to
Right.
switch gears a little bit. That was super insightful. I want to switch gears a little bit. Once you decided to actually make a change, like I'm going to go do something else, um, and started looking for other jobs, can you think back on that time and think about what were some of those challenges that you encountered as
Mhm.
you were going out and looking for these jobs? And I just want to point out that your past is like masters in marketing, bachelor's in accounting, and Ernst and Young internship,
Mhm.
moving to church.
Yeah,
So your experiences are
yeah,
very on seemingly opposite ends. So what were some of the challenges as you were
yeah.
starting to look out towards having something new?
Yes, I think it's probably worth disclaiming what I'm about to say with I'm an optimist to a fault, and I think I truly believe, like, the world is what you make it, and so just, like, do whatever you want. And so I quickly realized, like, okay, well, what are the biggest pain points that I have? I'm, like, sitting at a desk all day. I'm like, "Okay, well, that's the world," you know? So, like, what do I do now? And I had applied to, like, a few little, like, random agencies that I'd seen. I was looking for something small and flexible and kind of a little bit more relaxed, and after interviewing, I was kinda like, "I don't know if I want that." And I was like, "I think I'm gonna go freelance because why not? You know, now's the time to do it." And so I started freelancing on the side, like, a few months before I actually quit my job, and it was working. And I just kind of started reaching out to people like, "This is what I've been doing. I've been doing, you know, advertising, I've been doing websites, I've been doing email, and I'd love to do that for you." And I quickly found that there were a lot of people who were willing to take that chance on me. And so I started working on the side and I
Super
ultimately
cool.
moved to part-time and I took Fridays off. Did that for a few months and then fully left over the summer. And so I really didn't do too much resume building and getting myself out there. I think I was at a huge advantage that my skills were very easily transferable into the corporate world. They made sense on paper. I managed an email list of 900,000. Like I had a social media account of 100,000 followers, things like that that were very quantifiable for people. Um, during after that, I did work part-time at an agency that was local to Atlanta because I quickly realized I like being around people as well. And so I had this like part-time job at an agency that I could go in, hang out with some people, but then I was still kind of freelancing on the side. Um, and so I remember the biggest thing that was when I was looking to make that transition out and figuring out how I was going to do it. I had to be really honest with myself of what are the things about this job that I do not want to repeat. And the biggest one was sitting at a desk all day. And I just was really discouraged for a few months when I would look around and I was like, Stephanie, that is life. That is work. That is what people do. And I would have people tell me that. They're like, you're just not being realistic. And I was like, yeah, maybe, but, like, if there's any time to try, it's when we, like, don't have a mortgage and we don't have kids, so, like, now's the time, and
Yep.
I'm so thankful that I did that crazy step.
So, so you made the transition to freelance and have pretty much been doing that ever since?
Yes, I worked at an agency for about a year in Atlanta. It was, like, on a part-time basis, again, just to, like, have some people to hang out with and learn some more tangible skills in the marketing world, and then at the beginning of 2021, I decided no, I'm going back all in on freelance, and so my husband and I packed up all of our stuff. We traveled the world for 4.5 months on my freelance money, and, ultimately, that's landed us here in Austin, and, yeah, I've been freelancing ever since, which in hindsight, I made that decision at the beginning of 2019, and so thankful because now I am able to, like, stay home with our son. I work when he sleeps, or when my husband's home in the morning, and it's been the solution to the problem that I was seeking 4 years ago that I didn't know I didn't have the insight to see all that that would offer me and how life-giving it would be. I love that I work on various clients in various industries with various services every single day. Think looking back, a huge pain point was like, I do the same thing for the same organization with the same channels all day, every day. But now I work on a probiotic company and I do their emails. And then I also have a client who is an artist in Nashville and I do her ads. And I also have a fast fashion boutique that I do ads for. And it's a little bit of everything. And I have not felt drained by my work since I left.
Wow. I That's incredible. The fact that you can honestly say, but for the past 4 years or
Hmm.
so, you have not felt drained by your work.
Hmm. Yeah.
And so I think my takeaways from some of what you just said was first, you had to be really honest with yourself and say, what are the things here that drain me? And I don't want to repeat that. So, like, what does that do? And what that did was sounds like is it essentially narrowed down the possibilities for you in a sense of like just process of elimination, kind of like first grade stuff, right? Like one of these things is not like the other. And you just kind of pick out
Yeah.
like, all right. And the desk was the thing for you of
Yeah.
I don't want to sit at a desk. And then there was some other stuff like I want to have some variety in life and in work and
Mhm.
want to be able to kind of like flow in and out when
Yeah.
it works for my schedule. And at the time it was traveling Europe and now
Yeah.
it's being a mom,
Right.
which is awesome. So I think that's super insightful. And for anybody who's wanting to feels the
Mhm.
tension of leaving a ministry job to move into a marketplace job, I'd love for you to
Mhm.
speak into this before we close down. But it sounds like for you, there were two sides to this. There was just the like objective, what's a good fit for me in terms of work side, like personality, values, skills, talents.
Mm.
Some things just didn't align. And then there was some other, like maybe more personal decisions, maybe having to do with family and some other stuff. And those can get kind of muddy when you're making the switch
Yeah.
because usually the ones where the emotions are the strongest are like what's right in our face, right?
Yeah.
Whatever we're
Mhm.
feeling in the moment is like, this is the thing. So, can you speak into that just a little bit to help anyone who's watching kind of sort through that decision making process
Mhm.
of acknowledging the reality of maybe the things that could be hurtful or painful, but also taking an objective look at is where I'm at the best fit for me or not?
Yeah. Oh, I mean, I think for years while I was working that job, I was praying like, God, give me, what's the word I'm looking for? Contentment. Just, I need to grow in my contentment. I need to grow in my patience. Like, this is me. And when I learned about the Enneagram, I'm like, oh, okay, so you had something different for me. And that was a really helpful realization because, like you said earlier, I don't think there's a piece of life on earth that you're going to struggle. You're going to endure things that you're not necessarily thrilled about. Um, and until I had some outside people looking in on my situation and saying, "This is not healthy. This is not healthy for your marriage. This is not healthy for you as a person. It feels like you're kinda growing a little bit gray here, like you're not as much life as you used to." Until I had those people looking in and speaking that, w that was when was able to kinda look outside of myself, I think, for the first time. And for me specifically, because I'm an Enneagram 7, I have a very awesome tendency to paint the past in rainbow colors. So what I had to do was I had to write down how I felt on my worst day, how I felt on my most exhausted day, what I was looking for, what I desired, and what I didn't like. And that's a note that I still revisit because when I left, I felt
Uh,
like, what did I do? This was like who I was. I had so much pride in this, working at this organization with so much responsibility. Um, that I was so easy and quick for me to forget how I felt and what people had said. And so that was a really big tool for me and still is something I, do with various aspects of life was just to remember like the how I felt piece. And that's given me a lot of confidence in that I made the right decision at that point in time. But I would say for me, it was a huge help for me to invite people in and to be just honest with. Because I'm an Enneagram 7, I also have a tendency to just paint scenarios that it wasn't that bad, it wasn't that bad, but you can't really do that with your spouse. And so when I got married and that was my first year of marriage and it was just like, "This isn't working," and, it was a huge tension point, and I get a lot of confidence from others, like, kind of making big decisions or at least weighing in, and when I realized, "Okay, this is not necessarily just, like, I need to grow and continue, this is I need to move on, and they're gonna be fine." Like, they don't need me. There are plenty of other qualified people that probably won't have as many typos that can take this job, and they're fine.
wow. You just said something that I think is so important is that whatever role we're in, we're not the only person that can do it.
Yeah.
And that is come as a person who was in ministry, who started the thing that I did and no one had ever done it before me. I
Mhm.
100% felt that. It's like, well, no, I'm the only one who can do this because I was the first one or I've been here longer. And you
Right.
just putting that out there is, I think, a really important truth that you're not the only one equipped to do this. And if your
Mhm.
time has come to move
Mhm.
on and God wants this thing to continue on without
Mhm.
you, he will bring someone
Right.
who might even be more
Yes.
qualified and a better
Yes.
fit than you.
100%.
Uh, I love that. And also want to point out really quickly before I give you our last question, um, how important community was in this
Mhm.
transition
Yeah.
for you to be able to see truth, be reality, be honest with yourself because the voices of other people who loved you could speak into these aspects of life that maybe you couldn't see clearly at the time. So,
Yeah.
importance of reality, importance of some humility in there, and
Yeah.
importance of community as you were making the transition and making the decision. Amazing. Okay, Steph, last question, and then I'll let you go because I know that you've got a little guy who needs some mom time. So, last question for you. How has this transition changed your life?
Yeah. It opened it all up. And I don't think that's to say, like, because I'm not in ministry anymore, my life is awesome. That's not what I'm saying. Think for my personality, uh, not working in ministry, not working a traditional job, like, the world is my oyster. And I know that that is so cheesy to say, but I would have never dreamed or even been able to dream of traveling the world for 4.5 months had I been working in this job. I would have never been able to be home full time with my son had I been working in this job. I would live in a different state. I would have different friends. I have gray hair, but I probably have more gray hair if I was still working there. Um, it really changed everything, and I don't say that in that, like, it was a terrible situation. I think it just became very evident that, like, I was not meant to be there, and I was not meant to be in this situation, any longer, but yeah, like I said, I love what I do now. I'm super fulfilled in what I do. It works within, like, all of the various seasons of life that have come and are yet to come, and it truly would not have been possible for me to live the life that I have over the last 4 years had I been in that role, and, yeah, I'm super thankful. Like, I'm super thankful for my experience there. I think it gave me, like, this amazing bird's eye view to marketing, and then I'm super thankful to be doing what I do now.
Amazing. Amazing. Thank you so much for your time, Steph. If
Yeah.
someone wants to find you and maybe use you for
Yes.
some marketing, where can they find you? Where's the best place to find you?
Yeah. Probably on LinkedIn is gonna be the best. So my name is Stephanie Scott on LinkedIn. I'm sure we'll be tagged in all of those things. But yeah, that's probably the best place.
Awesome. Steph, you're the best. Thanks so much for your time.
Yeah.
Good to see you.
Good to see you too, Todd.